My name is Alina, and if you had told me a year ago that the people I trusted most, my family, my sister, and the man I thought I would marry, would tear my entire life apart in a way so violent and so personal that it would split me open from the inside out, I would have laughed and said my family wasn't perfect, but we loved each other. We supported each other. We were supposed to be stronger than the chaos that other families broke under, and I truly believed that. I believed in my mother's soft reassurances, my father's quiet nods of approval, my fiancé Daniel's promises whispered at night, and my little sister Maya's smile. The same smile I helped fix when she lost her 2 front teeth in middle school and cried into my shirt. But love has a strange way of trickling through the cracks of a home until it rots from the inside, and betrayal tastes even stranger when it comes from the people whose voices raised you, shaped you, and told you that family comes first, even while they were sharpening the knife behind your back. And I didn't know how deeply those words could stab until the day my world collapsed under the weight of something so cruel, so preventable, and so intentional that for weeks I could barely breathe without feeling like the air itself hated me, like the universe was watching my collapse with cold fascination. It started on a Tuesday, the kind of day nobody remembers. When I got off work early, something rare for me, and I remember thinking I'd surprise Daniel with dinner. Maybe stop by the bakery he loved, pick up that caramel pastry he always pretended not to crave, and on the way home I even hummed to myself in the car, replaying the plans for our wedding in my mind, imagining the flowers, the music, the look on his face when he saw me walking down the aisle, and for the first time in weeks, I felt peaceful, grounded, hopeful. But hope can be a blindfold, and mine was tugged off violently the moment I walked through the door of my parents' house and heard muffled voices behind the bathroom door upstairs. Voices I recognized instantly, yet could not comprehend sharing the same space with that kind of breathless urgency, and my heart sank, not because I suspected infidelity, but because I thought maybe someone was hurt, maybe Maya had slipped or Daniel was helping her, because my mind simply refused to go to the darker place, the place where the truth actually lived. But when the door cracked open, when I saw Daniel's shirt half-buttoned, and Maya's tear-stained face, and the way they both froze like guilty children caught doing something unspeakable, I felt something inside me fracture. Not a break, not a shatter, but a slow, painful tearing, like fabric being ripped by force. And I remember whispering, "What are you doing?" Even though the answer was written all over the steam-filled room, and the silence that followed was louder than any scream I could have let out. Daniel's eyes dropped. Maya's hands covered her mouth, and the world tilted violently. But as surreal as that moment was, it was nothing compared to what came next, when my mother rushed in, saw the scene, and instead of grabbing Maya and demanding answers, she wrapped her arms around her and glared at me, as if I had walked in and broken something precious, and she said words that would haunt me in dreams for months. "Alina, don't overreact. She's young. She makes mistakes. We have to be patient with her." And for a second I thought I misheard, thought grief was distorting sound. But then my father stepped forward, nodding slowly, putting a hand on Maya's shoulder, telling me, "Your sister didn't mean for this to happen. She's confused. We need to protect her." And Daniel, my fiancé, the man who once cried in my arms when he proposed, stood there silent, cowardly, not reaching for me, not apologizing, just staring at the floor like a child who broke a vase and hoped silence would glue the pieces back together. And then Maya, trembling, whispered the final blow. "Alina, I'm pregnant." And the world didn't just fall apart then, it exploded, violently, inward, outward, everywhere at once. And I swear I felt my soul leave my body for a moment, like I was watching everything from above, the steam curling around their faces, Maya clutching her stomach as if the pregnancy itself were a shield, Daniel standing there trapped between shame and cowardice, and my parents staring at me like I was the intruder, the threat, the problem, and something in me froze. Not the kind of freeze that comes from fear, but the kind that comes from a heartbreak so enormous your brain shuts down just to protect what's left of you. And I remember leaning against a hallway wall because my legs simply gave out, and the only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears like a warning siren that had come too late. But shock has a cruel timeline because before I could even fully process what I had heard, my mother was already ushering Maya away as if she were a delicate piece of porcelain, and my father guided Daniel downstairs, patting him on the back like he was the victim who needed support, and I sat there on the floor feeling like the world had been gutted around me. Minutes passed, I think, but time felt distorted, like someone had grabbed the edges of reality and stretched them thin, and by the time I made it downstairs, my family was already in the living room, forming a protective circle around Maya and Daniel, whispering urgently like strategists planning a defense. And when they noticed me, the room went quiet in a way that felt staged, rehearsed, like they had already decided their roles in this twisted theater where I was the villain for daring to hurt over the betrayal done to me. My mother stood first, straightening her blouse as if preparing for battle, and she said in that patronizing voice she used whenever she decided she was right, "Alina, we all need to be adults about this." Maya is terrified, and Daniel is confused. They didn't mean for things to go this far, and I almost laughed, a hysterical, broken laugh, because the idea that two grown adults could accidentally betray me wasn't just absurd, it was insulting. But before I could speak, my father chimed in with that tired sigh he reserved for conversations he didn't want to have. "Your sister is young. You know how easily she gets attached." Daniel shouldn't have entertained it, but you two weren't in the best place either. And when he said that last part, I felt something sharp lodge in my chest, because suddenly they weren't just defending betrayal. They were rewriting history to justify it, painting me as the inattentive partner, the cold fiancé, the reason Daniel had apparently tripped and fallen into my sister's bed. And then, the worst part, the part that burned hotter than any betrayal. Maya looked up at me with those wide, pitiful eyes, the same eyes she used every time she wanted to get out of trouble growing up, and whispered, "I didn't do this to hurt you. I just needed someone," and Daniel listened. And the audacity of it, the twisted innocence in her voice, made me feel like I was drowning in a pool of all the ways I had protected her growing up, covered for her when she snuck out, helped her with homework, stayed up with her at night when she cried over boys, all of it trampled by the fact that when she wanted comfort, she climbed into the arms of my fiancé. And when I finally found my voice, it came out small, brittle, but sharp enough to cut. "Why didn't any of you call me? Why didn't you tell me something was going on before it became this?" And the silence that followed was worse than any answer because it told me everything. They knew, maybe not everything, maybe not consciously, but they sensed something, and instead of stopping it, instead of confronting Maya or Daniel, they waited, watched, let it happen, and that realization burned through me like acid, because it meant I wasn't just betrayed by two people, I was betrayed by all of them. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife deeper, Daniel finally spoke, his voice low and shaky, but there was a softness to it, a softness he used to save for me. And he said, "Alina, I didn't plan for this, but something happened, and you and I have been distant." And that was when something snapped inside me, not loudly, not violently, but with a quiet, final click, like a locked door sealing shut. And I looked at him and saw not the man I loved, but a stranger wearing his face, a coward hiding behind excuses, a man who broke years of trust for a moment of weakness, and then asked me to understand, to accept, to forgive, all because my sister was young. And when my mother stepped closer and gently pushed Daniel to sit beside Maya, as if pairing them like some new harmonious couple, I realized that my family had already chosen sides, already decided the narrative, already discarded me because protecting the youngest was more important than protecting the one who had been wronged. And in that moment, I understood something painful and liberating. If they could betray me this easily, then they were never truly my family. They were just people tied to me by blood and habit, people who loved the idea of me until it became inconvenient. I stood there in that living room surrounded by faces that suddenly felt like strangers, and I felt a cold, calm clarity settle over me. The kind of clarity that comes not from peace but from devastation so complete it becomes cleansing. And I realized that if no one in that room would stand up for me, then I would stand up for myself. And not in a loud way, not in a dramatic explosion of rage, but in the quiet, deliberate way that changes everything. So I wiped my face, straightened my spine, and said the only words I could manage without breaking. "You've made your choice. All of you. And then I walked out, but not before seeing Maya lean into Daniel like she already believed he belonged to her, like she was claiming him right in front of me, and the sight of it carved something permanent into my chest. A wound I would later learn to use not just as a scar, but as fuel for the revenge I never planned to take until they pushed me so far that revenge became the only thing keeping me alive. And when I stepped outside into the cold evening air, the sky already dimming into that bruised purple that only appears right before night fully takes over, I felt the weight of my entire life pressing down on me. But underneath that crushing grief was something else, something small, sharp, and growing, like the first flicker of a flame. And though I didn't know it at the time, that tiny spark would later become the fire that engulfed everything they thought they had taken from me. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, hands shaking on the steering wheel, tears streaming down my face until my vision blurred into watery streaks of the world outside, and I kept replaying their words, their faces, their excuses, my mother's condescending tone, my father's disappointment directed at me, Maya's trembling victim act, and Daniel's hollow apology that felt more like a justification, and I asked myself over and over, how could they?
How could all of them do this to me?
But each answer hurt more than the last because the truth was simple and cruel. They didn't value me the way I valued them, they didn't love me the way I loved them, and they didn't see me as someone worth protecting. At some point, my phone buzzed with messages I refused to open. My mother telling me to come back and be rational. Maya saying she was sorry but also scared. Daniel rambling about needing to talk things through. And in that moment, I realized something that should have been comforting, but instead felt like swallowing glass. Nobody in that house cared about my pain. They cared about managing the situation, controlling it, smoothing it over to avoid scandal or guilt or accountability, and my suffering was nothing more than an inconvenience to them. I drove away slowly, my body moving on autopilot even though my mind felt like it had shattered into 1,000 pieces, and I ended up at my apartment, the one place that still felt like mine. But when I walked in, everything inside hurt even more. His jacket on the chair, his mug in the sink, the framed engagement photo on the console table where Daniel kissed my forehead and my sister stood beside us holding the flowers she insisted on choosing for the shoot, and realizing now that she was smiling not out of support, but because she had already laid claim to something that didn't belong to her, and I collapsed on the living room floor, pressing my forehead against the rug because the physical pressure eased the emotional pressure just enough for me to breathe. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Maybe hours, because the next time I checked the clock, it was past midnight, the apartment dark except for the flicker of streetlights through the blinds, and in that darkness, I felt something new take root inside me, something steadier than pain, something colder than despair. Resolve. I replayed the way they dismissed me, the way they circled around Maya like she was the one who had been betrayed, the way Daniel had already stepped into the role of protector for her like he hadn't destroyed me to get there, and my mother's voice echoed in my head. She's young. She makes mistakes. And I realized that in their eyes, Maya was always the baby, the fragile one, the one whose wrongs were forgiven before they were even acknowledged, and I had unknowingly lived my entire life in the role of the responsible one, the steady one, the one expected to hold everything together, and for the first time ever, I let myself reject that role completely. I wiped my face, stood up slowly, and walked into the bathroom, turning on the cold water and splashing it over the swollen mess of my face. And when I looked into the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. My eyes were hollow, my expression shaky, but beneath all of that was a quiet intensity one had never seen before, a readiness. And I knew that if they wanted to treat me like I didn't matter, then I would show them what it meant when I stopped pretending that I did. Over the next few days, I ignored every call and every message, my mother alternating between guilt-tripping and scolding, my father trying to be the voice of reason, Maya sending long paragraphs about being confused and needing support, and Daniel begging to talk just one more time. And while they spiraled, trying desperately to pull me back into the orbit where they controlled the narrative, I began to rebuild the parts of me they had tried to break. Quietly, methodically, piece by piece. I went to work, forced myself to function even though my chest still felt like it was caving in, and at night I sat on my couch planning, Not revenge, not at first, just a way to detach from them completely, to reclaim the identity they had tied so tightly to their expectations that I didn't know who I was without them. But the more I sat with my pain, the more I realized that detachment alone wasn't enough, because they hadn't just hurt me, they had humiliated me, dismissed me, replaced me, and they were all still sitting together in that house, comforting each other, building a new life around the betrayal that had shattered mine, acting like I would eventually calm down and come crawling back, apologizing for making things harder. And that was when the fire inside me grew, when the idea formed slowly, dangerously, beautifully, that if my family wanted to act like my suffering was insignificant, then I would show them the true cost of choosing the wrong side. I didn't want revenge out of spite. I wanted justice, balance, closure, and the kind of peace that only comes when the scales of betrayal are leveled. And I knew that the only way to do that was to take everything they took from me and make them feel it, not instantly, not explosively, but gradually, in a way that would force them to sit in the very pain they refused to acknowledge. And as the plan began forming in my mind, dark but grounded, cruel but fair, I felt the first real breath of relief since the day everything fell apart. And the strange thing was, the more the plan sharpened in my mind, the more I felt myself returning to my body, like the numbness that had wrapped around me since the bathroom door opened was finally thinning, and beneath it was something dangerously steady, a version of myself I didn't know I was capable of becoming, someone who could look at the ruins of her life and quietly start building a weapon out of the debris. The first step wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic, it wasn't even vengeful. It was simply gathering information, because I needed to understand the timeline of their betrayal, how long it had been happening behind my back, and how deeply my family had been involved in enabling it. And the answer came faster than expected when Daniel's guilt finally outweighed his pride, and he sent a long, desperate email confessing everything he hadn't had the courage to say to my face, that he and Maya had been emotionally close for months, that it just happened one night after a fight he and I had, that he had tried to end it but she threatened to hurt herself, that he had told my parents out of fear, and that they had told him to stay quiet until things settled. And reading that message made me physically nauseous because there, in his own words, was proof that I had been the last to know, proof that my parents had been protecting her long before I even sensed something was wrong, proof that my family had quietly chosen to sacrifice me so Maya wouldn't face consequences. But mixed into the disgust was something else. Confirmation, validation, a blueprint of every weak point I could use, because betrayal doesn't just destroy, it exposes, and their secrets were laid out neatly now, waiting for me to decide how to use them. Over the next weeks, I pretended to disappear, letting them think I was drowning in heartbreak, wallowing in isolation, too fragile to function. And they grew comfortable in that illusion, relieved even because my silence allowed them to continue rewriting the narrative however they wanted, and they became bolder, posting pictures together, dropping subtle comments online about family unity, even announcing Maya's pregnancy publicly with a syrupy caption about unexpected blessings, and all of it built a pressure in my chest that didn't suffocate me this time. It fueled me. I started quietly selling everything Daniel had left at my apartment, every jacket, every piece of tech, every gift he'd ever given me, and transferred the money into a separate account he didn't know existed. And when I was done clearing the space, I deep cleaned the entire apartment from ceiling to floor, like I was purging his existence from every molecule of air. And when I finished, I sat on my couch, breathing in the emptiness, and realized that what hurt me the most wasn't losing him. It was losing the version of myself who believed my family would always protect me. But that version was gone, burned away by the truth, and in her place was someone who understood that sometimes the only way to survive was to become the storm people assumed you were too gentle to create. So I went quiet, deliberately, purposefully, because distance is a weapon if used correctly, and while they thought I was broken, I watched them carefully, my mother posting photos of Maya and Daniel like a proud mother-in-law, my father pretending nothing was wrong, Maya basking in the attention of being pregnant with someone else's fiancé, and Daniel shrinking into the background of their dysfunction like he had been absorbed into the family before the ink on the betrayal had even dried. And with every glimpse of their new happiness, I plan more meticulously. My therapist, yes, I started therapy quietly and for myself, told me that closure didn't always come from forgiveness. Sometimes it came from reclaiming the narrative, and for the first time, someone said something that didn't invalidate my pain, didn't tell me to let it go, didn't tell me to be the bigger person. And that validation alone became oxygen to a fire they thought had burned out. Months passed, and the pregnancy grew, and with it grew their confidence that the crisis had passed, that I had accepted my place as the family's sacrificial lamb. And then my mother called one evening out of the blue, her voice warm and patronizing, asking me to please come to dinner so we can mend this before the baby is born. As though my heartbreak was a scheduling conflict to resolve before her grandchild arrived, and I remember staring at the phone, listening to her talk about family unity while the image of Maya clinging to Daniel the day they confessed flashed through my mind like a branded mark I could never scrub away. And that was when I knew it was time. Not for the final act, not yet, but for the first major shift, the first ripple that would shake their illusion of control. Because the cruelest revenge isn't fast or loud. It's patient, calculated, delivered in soft steps that feel like coincidence until the trap finally closes. So I agreed to come, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I needed them to believe they still had the upper hand. And when I walked into my parents' house for the first time in months and saw Maya's swollen belly, Daniel's nervous eyes, and my parents' forced smiles, something in me settled. Not fear, not pain, not anger, but certainty. The kind that comes from knowing the next move is yours, and they have no idea they've already lost. And the moment I stepped into that living room, every pair of eyes flicked to me with a mixture of relief, suspicion, and the kind of cautious hope people have when they think the disaster has finally passed. And I let them believe it, let them read softness in my steady posture, let them mistake my calm for surrender, because the sweetest revenge begins with the illusion of peace. My mother rushed forward first, pulling me into a hug I didn't return, her hands patting my back like she was soothing a child, whispering, "I knew you'd come around," and I smiled. Not because I felt warmth, but because the smile itself was another piece of the mask I needed them to see. And when she let go, her face relaxed, the tightness around her eyes easing as though my mere presence absolved everyone of their guilt. My father gave me a curt nod, the same practiced, stoic expression he used whenever he pretended to be the reasonable one. And behind them, Daniel stood awkwardly, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes darting anywhere but my face, while Maya sat on the couch with her hands folded over her stomach like she was cradling the world's most precious treasure, her lips curved into a soft, fragile smile that would have made me pity her once, but now only reminded me of the selfishness she disguised as innocence. They had clearly rehearsed this moment, my mother urging everyone to sit, my father clearing his throat like he was about to deliver a speech, Maya offering me a tentative "I'm glad you came," in that breathy voice she always used when she wanted sympathy, and Daniel muttering something about being willing to talk things out. And for a brief second, I watched the scene from outside myself, as though I were an observer instead of the woman whose life they had casually demolished. And I saw the truth so clearly it was almost laughable. They weren't trying to mend anything. They were trying to secure their positions before the baby arrived. They wanted to fix the family, so the child wouldn't grow up in tension. They wanted to relieve their own guilt. They wanted to make sure I wouldn't become a problem later. And most importantly, they wanted me to bless the twisted little world they had built out of my stolen future. So when my father finally began speaking about healing and moving forward and doing what's best for the family, I leaned back, folded my hands slowly in my lap, and let his well-practiced monologue roll over me like background noise, giving him nothing. No tears, no objections, not even a flicker of emotion, just a calm, unreadable mask that made him falter halfway through his speech, because my silence was louder than anything I could have said. And when they all looked at me, waiting for some grand acceptance, some admission that I was ready to let go of the past, I gave them exactly what they least expected, a soft, steady voice whispering, "You're right. I think it's time we move forward." And the collective exhale in the room was almost comical, like they had all been holding their breath waiting for my cooperation. And the joy on Maya's face, joy that she interpreted as forgiveness, was the moment I knew definitively that she had no idea what was coming. My mother clasped her hands together excitedly, already launching into plans about holiday dinners and family gatherings. And Daniel even attempted to sit beside me until I subtly shifted away. A movement small but sharp enough that he froze mid-step, his face tightening with the first flicker of understanding that maybe my calm wasn't submission but something else entirely. Dinner was served like a celebration, my mother chattering about baby names and my father reminiscing about old memories, and I played the role perfectly, nodding, smiling faintly, speaking only when necessary, giving them just enough warmth to believe I was back under their control. And with every passing minute, their guard fell lower and lower until they were completely comfortable, completely unprepared, completely blind to the change simmering quietly behind my eyes. After dinner, my mother insisted I stay for dessert, her famous cheesecake, the one she always made for special occasions, and as she cut the slices, she placed one in front of me with an affectionate squeeze on my shoulder, murmuring, "I'm glad we're a family again." And I thanked her softly, even though the word family had never sounded more foreign, never felt more fraudulent. When it was time to leave, Maya hugged me, as if she were the one welcoming me back, and the absurdity of it almost made me laugh. But I hugged her back gently, lightly, just long enough to convince her that the bridge she burned had magically rebuilt itself, and as I pulled away, I placed a hand on her arm and said, "Take care of yourself. Everything is going to change soon," and she smiled, blissfully unaware of the truth layered beneath my words. The night air outside was warm, heavy, humid, and as I walked to my car, I felt the strange sense of liberation that comes not from healing but from decision. The kind of decision that shifts the ground beneath everything that comes next. And when I sat in the driver's seat, closing the door slowly, sealing myself in silence, the smile that rose on my lips wasn't one of peace. It was one of certainty, because now that they all believed they had me back, now that they saw me as harmless, predictable, forgiven, I finally had everything I needed to begin the part of my plan that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Yet even as my plan finally began to turn inward toward its conclusion, I felt the strange quiet that settles in after a storm, the kind of stillness that feels earned but also dangerous, because silence gives you too much time to think, and thinking forces you to confront what you've become. So I spent nights staring at my ceiling, replaying everything. Eric's trembling voice when he realized he'd lost me. My sister's cracked whisper when she confessed to the pastor that she didn't even know how to love herself, let alone someone else. My parents' desperate attempts to gather the family back together like nothing had happened, as if they could glue broken glass without cutting themselves, and the messages piling up from relatives who pretended to care about accountability now that the truth was public. And yet despite all of this chaos, all of this unraveling, what hit me hardest was the realization that revenge isn't a single event. It's a path you walk, one you don't even notice. You're lost on until you look back and see the miles of destruction behind you, a path that changes you in small ways at first, and then all at once. And I realized that I wasn't the same naive woman who once believed love was enough, or that family loyalty was unconditional, or that forgiveness was the natural end to all wounds, because now I understood something sharper, something harsher, something adults whisper but never say out loud. Sometimes the people who hurt you don't deserve a soft ending. Sometimes the consequences they face must be firm because that's the only language they understand. But even then, even when justice feels justified, it still leaves a scar on your own hands. And as the holidays approached and my parents kept trying to convince me to come home just for dinner and try to talk it out, I felt a cold truth settle deep inside me. There was no home anymore, not with them. Not with the people who watched me drown and only complained that the splash got their clothes wet. And yet it was exactly that clarity that made me start preparing for the next step, the part of my plan that wasn't about punishment anymore, but about reclaiming myself, rebuilding what they tried to break, taking everything I lost and turning it into something that terrified them. Independence, peace, and power. And that's when I decided that part one of my life, the part where I played by their rules, stayed quiet, stayed loyal, stayed forgiving, was over. And as I packed the last box in my apartment and sealed it shut, knowing I was about to move into a new chapter they couldn't follow me into, I took one final look around and whispered to myself, not in anger but in certainty. This is only the beginning, because the real reckoning, the real justice, the real truth of what I've been planning, that was all coming next, and none of them were prepared for the storm I had saved for part 2 of my revenge.